Welcome back to Temple Bound. So guys, what happens when you do all the right things and life still goes wrong? It feels heavy. Today on Temple Bound, I'm joined by Kristen Smith, whose story will resonate with anyone who's ever felt overwhelmed or confused by the pain that they're sitting in despite doing the right things. Kristen's going to share what it's like to navigate decades of marriage while her husband stepped away from the church, how she wrestled with her own faith, her health, and her expectations of God along the way. She has a really cool take on praying for miracles that I can't wait for you to hear, because it's about a story of awareness, healing, and learning how to love without conditions. This is going to be a powerful episode. Enjoy the show. Well, I am so excited to be here with Kristen Smith. Thank you so much for taking time to be on the show, Kristen.
Yes, I'm so excited. This is such a great opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and your story is such a powerful one. Would you mind just getting right into it? Let's talk about your journey and what had you reach out to be like, hey, I feel like I need to share my story with the rest of the world.
Well, the main thing about my story is that my husband and I have been married for 30 years. We just celebrated our 30-year anniversary this year. And there was this point this summer where I've got 4 daughters. 3 of them are now married as of this last summer. I've got 3 grandbabies, and all of them they gathered at my house for celebrating our 30-year anniversary, right? And we were in the middle of the chaos and the crazy and all the things that family brings, right? And I remember just sitting back and feeling so grateful, because just like noticing how much joy and fun and laughter that was going on. And it was interesting because even 5 years ago, like, it was not like that.
In your life.
I remember as those 4 girls were growing up that we had similar situations, where we were gathering to celebrate and do all the things. And I just did not feel the joy. It was chaotic. It was stressful. I was exhausted. My body was physically, like, I didn't feel good. I had stomach aches. I had, like, all the things. I had resorted to anxiety medication because I found myself crying in the closet a lot. And I was a working mom, so that was so amazing for me because I'd always wanted to be a mom. And it was amazing to be able to work from home because I was able to still do all the mom things. And I was able to still help provide for the family. But it was kind of a double-edged sword because, again, I was exhausted. And from the outside looking in, I don't think very many people realized how bad I was struggling at the time, but I was struggling for years, and I was doing all the things, taking, all the sports, all the kids. I had 2 kids. My 2 kids at that time were teenagers. We were doing all of the things, and I was just exhausted. I remember even one day, after I'd been up late the night before trying to finish my work, I was still in bed. I think it was in the middle of the summer, and I was excited that I didn't have to get the kids up for school, so I was still in bed trying to get some sleep, and my 8-year-old daughter comes jumping in my room, bouncing on my bed, and I remember snapping. I don't know if you guys have ever, like when you're sleeping and somebody wakes you up, right? She comes in the room, she's like poking at me, Mom, 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 and I'm like, get out of my room. I'm still sleeping, like, get out.
Yeah.
Like yelling at her. And I just remember the look on her face. She just looked at me and she was like, just confused,
devastated,
right?
Yeah.
She's like, but Mom, it's my birthday.
Oh.
Yeah. I was like, I felt like the worst mom in the world, right? Like, I'm sure people could relate to this. But I mean, that's just how it was going. Like, I didn't feel very good. And above and beyond all of that, my husband had stopped going to church over the years. Church was so important to me. Like, I believed in the church. I believed in everything that I'd been taught. I was faithfully serving. I was faithfully trying to do all the callings that I had. I was faithfully doing all the things, and it didn't make any sense to me why he didn't believe the same. So we constantly were arguing. It caused a lot of contention in our marriage. And you probably remember the talk that President Nelson gave a bunch of years ago, right, where he mentioned expecting miracles.
Yeah.
I had actually purchased this necklace that says expecting miracles. After I heard that message, I was like so excited about it, right? Because I was like, I was praying. he was going to change. He was going to his heart was going to be changed. He was going to understand how important the gospel was in our lives and how we should be doing all these things in the church, right? And I remember, and I prayed. Like, I went to the temple. I had experiences in the temple even then. Like, it's okay. Like, be patient. It'll be okay. And to me, that meant he was going to change one day. And I specifically remember one time where I found myself again crying in the closet. I was in my closet. We'd had an argument. I was playing with the necklace. I was again praying that he would change. And I heard that small voice in my head that said, "You're praying for the wrong miracle." And I was like, well, I knew exactly what that meant, right? I knew that it was me that needed to change. It was me that needed to change. It was me that needed to love. The miracle would really be me loving my husband for exactly who he was without expecting him to change, right? Which is what I had been taught my whole life in the gospel. Which that is what Jesus is teaching us, right? But there was still an expectation, and the problem was at that point is that I had no idea how to do that. Like, I felt like I was trying. I felt like I was doing all the things. I didn't know how to change. And one of the biggest things that, well, there's several things that happened at that point. I mentioned I was struggling physically, and so one of the things that had happened is that I had mentioned a friend had talked about how I saw her talking about how she was doing some gut health stuff.
Yeah.
Learning about gut health. So that really caught on to me. I started learning about the things that she was doing for gut health, and I started learning about gut health, and I started like getting the nutrition in my body that I needed. Like, remember, I was sitting at a desk. I had an at-home computer job, so I sat at a desk all day long. So that wasn't healthy for one. And then we tried to eat good, but it wasn't that great, right? So as I started learning about the gut health and taking more care of my body, that was the first thing that actually stemmed the change in my life. Is as I started feeling better physically and getting the nutrition in my body, I started like walking around the neighborhood and getting up and moving my body more. And so I think for me, that was the really initial point of change for me in my life. And as I started to feel better physically, it gave me the capacity to start working on my mindset. So
isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it is. It's so crazy. So it was probably about a year into this process when, again, I had a friend and a colleague who said, "Hey, I saw this podcast, this life coach podcast thing that looks really interesting to me. Do you want to join it with me?" And I was like, "Sure." So I joined this podcast, and it was actually Jody Moore. I don't know if you've heard of Jody Moore, but I started watching Jody Moore's podcast, and I actually joined her program and started watching like her group coaching. And I did that for about 2 years, and I loved it so much. She talks about, the aspect of your thoughts cause your feelings. It's not the circumstances in your life that cause your feelings. It's your thoughts that cause your feelings. And it's amazing how much you can learn by watching someone else get coached, right? So I'd sit and watch her coach other people, and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I totally get that. I totally feel like that." Or sometimes I'd be like, "That's dumb. I don't understand why you think that." But
right.
But it's so crazy how much I was able to learn in the 2 years that I was doing that. And I really loved it. I really loved watching her coach, and I really related to her a lot. And then at that same time, my husband and I decided, we actually lived in Stansbury Park, Utah at the time, and we'd lived there for 17 years. And my youngest graduated from high school, and we decided to move to Heber, where my husband got a new job up in Heber. So there was a year in that period of time where we were building a house. So we commuted an hour and a half to build the house. He was already working up there, living with my sister. It was a very chaotic year, even though I was doing so well working with my physical healing and my mental healing, we were struggling. Like, building a house, and it was the second time we'd done that. It was the second time we'd build a house, so we were like, "Oh, we can do this. It's not a problem." But we're 15 years older. Actually, Actually, I
Right?
do feel younger. I feel a lot younger now than I
You
did
feel younger
5 years
now than you
ago.
did
So
15 years ago. Yeah.
yeah, so actually that is true. But during that time, I didn't feel younger, and we were arguing and fighting and throwing out the divorce word, and like there was just a lot
Is that
going on.
because were you guys fighting mostly about the fact that his faith in the church was diminishing and he was leaving? Like, was it? I mean, I don't want to get too personal, but you do indicate that like his that change in faith for him was a big impact for you, and I'm guessing that was a. How much was that in terms of the stress that you were going through at that time?
Well, I blamed it on that for sure. Like in my mind, that was the
Like
whole
all of it
reason.
was that.
Yeah, all of it was that. For me, it was all that. But we fought about everything. It was we didn't ever talk about that because if we actually brought the gospel and the church up, like we literally it was a fight. For the last 15 years it was a fight. So we both avoided that conversation.
Was he going to church at that time?
He would go here and there before COVID, but as soon as COVID hit and we everybody stopped going to church, he never really went back after that.
Got it. Got it.
Except for a few things. Like my daughter went on a mission, so he would come to the farewells and the homecomings and all those kind of things. But other than that, he wasn't coming at all.
So the marriage was there was just layers to the challenges within that marriage, and you had been going through this for years. You had this physical ailment that was causing a lot of compound issue there, and so as you started healing your gut, it gave you some space to start finding some healing. And you find this coach, you start recognizing that it's you that will change instead of wanting for others to change as the miracle. You're the one who's like, I'm going to change, and that coaching sounds like it was part of that change for you.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And actually, it was probably about a year into the coaching where there was a specific weekend I remember where we we got in a big huge fight. I have no idea what it was about, but I remember we got in a big huge fight. And then he had to go somewhere. And I don't even remember where he was, but I remember he was gone and I was home. Maybe it was up here to work in Heber. I don't even know, but I remember he was gone from our home for 2 or 3 days. And I remember I was at my breaking point where I was like, I can't live like this anymore.
Yeah.
I I I'm sad, I'm hurt, I'm mad. Like there's so many emotions going on inside of me and I can't do this. Like it was a point where I had to decide whether I wanted to be in this marriage or whether I didn't, right? Like and I was really contemplating like, do I need to leave? And the hard thing about that was that I mean, there were neither one of us were doing anything that really neglect. I don't know what the word is, but like there was no infidelity. There was none of that stuff. It was literally we just fought all the time.
Yeah, there wasn't like this hidden addictions. There wasn't like this
No,
outside the
none of
marriage
that.
stuff. It was you guys were literally on paper just two great human beings that couldn't get along.
Yes, my husband is amazing. Like he cooks and he cleans. He does all the. I mean, he even stayed home as Mr. Mom for quite a while because my job provided better, and so he like did all the mom things. He did the carpool things. He cooks. He cleans. He takes care of the cars. He like does everything.
Yeah.
I haven't been grocery shopping in 30 years. Like he'll go to work. He'll call me and say, "I'm stopping at the grocery store on the way home. What do you need?" And I don't even have to go grocery shopping, right? Like he's amazing. But yet still in my mind, he wasn't doing anything right. Like
Yeah.
everything he did was wrong. And so we were fighting about everything. And so I wasn't treating him good. He wasn't treating me good. We weren't being nice to each other at all.
Yeah.
And there was this one point where I was like, I have got to be like, I've got to decide. Like I feel like I've been on the fence in this marriage for years now, and I've got to decide whether I really want to be married. And it's interesting because I don't feel like I've ever been a depressed person. Like I personally haven't had those feelings of like suicide or wanting to leave this earth, but those 3 days were heart wrenching. Like
Yeah.
I specifically remember like I did not want to move forward the way that our life was at the time. And and so I didn't get out of bed for 3 days. It was
Wow.
yeah, it was hard. But I remember at the end of the 3 days, and I think it was because of the coaching, because of the realization that it was in my mind and the expect miracles reminder, right? All of that and my reminder of the love that God has for me and that Jesus has for me. it was a reminder that it, again, was me that needed to that needed to change my mindset. And it was at that point where our relationship really did start to change. Not overnight. Believe me, it wasn't
Well, and
overnight.
during this time, if I can, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing again that when you're in those 3 days of being in bed and you don't want to move forward, it feels to me that like, again, you were hanging a lot of the problems on the fact that he wasn't a part of the church.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I just want to acknowledge the fact that that was very real for you, that was really hard. And for him, I'm imagining it was what we've heard and seen when people leave, that they aren't feeling seen, loved, or heard themselves.
Absolutely.
So there was, in a way, a foundation around that decision for him that was causing both of you to struggle around that being loved and seen, because it was such a foundational shift in your
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah. It absolutely was. And there was, and at that point, it did start to shift, right? Like
Yeah.
I feel
Once
like
you started
there
shifting,
was
it shifted.
more of an awareness in my around my thoughts, so I would notice when I was dwelling on the negative and when I wasn't noticing the good that he did, when I was focused on the fact that he wasn't doing things that I necessarily wanted him to do, right?
Right.
And the problem was is that I it's one thing to be aware and notice, and it's another thing to be able to like shift what those thoughts are, right? And it did take some practice for me in order to do that, but I definitely noticed the shift, and that's when we started to have better conversations. But then once we moved here to Heber, I think this is where the biggest shift was, is when, and again, I think they're all related, the physical, the emotional, the mindset, right? I met a couple here in Heber who teach a coaching program, a coaching certification up here, and I was very, very intrigued with them. I was very, very drawn to them. And they were not members of our church. And so it was interesting, again, another awareness to me, that I was so drawn to them and to their program, where I had done Jody Moore for 2 years, and she also offers a similar program, and I was so intrigued with it that I really wanted to do that. It was, at that point, I was like, I'm going to sign up for Jody Moore's program, because I really think that I could help people with this life coaching with the things that I've learned so far. Or I met these people here in town that are not members of our church, and I was really drawn to them. So I ended up signing up for their program, and I learned so much from them. And their program was still a little bit different. Again, like, I love Jody Moore, and I relate to her, and I think she does a lot of the same stuff. But learning in this environment where it was so much different than what I was used to, it actually tore and like pulled me out of my it really pulled me out of the LDS box that I'd lived in my whole life, right? It challenged my beliefs. It made me wonder and question things that sometimes I didn't even understand why, right? Like, why do I even care about this? Why am I even trying to figure this out? Why can't I just believe it and know that it's true, and not worry about the details, and not worry about the scientific of it, or, like all those little things? It just brought up lots of different questions. And they also taught me the tools to be able to actually go back and deal with some of the things that had happened in the past, both in my relationship with my husband, my marriage, right? But also like childhood emotions, and even sometimes like emotions that I was holding on to in regards to like generational, like things that my parents had gone through and things that my grandparents had gone through. And they taught me these tools where I was able to go back and learn from different events and release the emotions that I was holding on to, and move forward in a different way, really, is what it did. And it was interesting, again, the connection between the physical, the mindset, and the emotional, and how all three of those are connected. And once I was able to address all three of those, it was like real healing began.
Yeah. Now let me ask you, how does this relate to the gospel? Like, is this you said outside the LDS box? Are you saying outside of the gospel? Like, are these connected? Are they separate?
Well, so the couple that I've been learning from, so they they teach all these tools and trainings regarding life coaching, right? Learning
Yeah.
how to release emotions and all that kind of stuff. They've done all this research around different religions and cultures, and so when they're doing their teachings, it's very spiritual. It's a very spiritual
Sure.
process. It's not, and so as I would sit and listen to them teach and coach, my mind was always constantly, even now, every time I go into their container, it's like, how does this relate to what I've learned my whole life? How is this different from what I've learned my whole life? Is that the same thing? They're saying it in different words, but it seems like it's the same thing. And it made me realize that and again, I think it's just that I really hadn't paid attention to it before. I was raising 4 girls. I was working. I was
Yeah.
busy. Like there was a million things going on. I think I'm just in a different place in life now too, where I have more of a capacity to actually learn
Well,
things in a
plus
different way.
you're married in a situation where those concepts are being challenged. I think that's
Absolutely.
something where it's like there's a need to solve that. You've gone through this journey, you get the coaching. How how you started shifting in your marriage because you started being the miracle and the change that God was telling you to be. So, talk to me more from that point on. Like what was going on in your world, and of course, let's talk about the temple and how that plays into your story.
Well, one thing that this is one of the realizations that I have that I think made a lot of difference too is the fact that we all think differently, right?
Yeah.
And we hear about the term opposites attract. And it's funny because I think to me, and maybe this is just me, I don't know, but I always just thought, yeah, opposites attract. That means he's different than me and I'm different. Like we attract each other, but still my goal, my whole marriage was that I was supposed to be making him like me, right?
Mm.
Like you should be doing things like me. But realizing that we all think different and it's designed that way, like, right? It's as
Yeah.
designed.
Sure.
So learning that the reason opposites attract is because that other person has a quality or things about him. I mean, I'm talking about my husband here, but it can be any relationship, right? Your kids, your friends, anybody that comes in, anybody that you attract into your life is usually because you are projecting a specific energy that you lack, right?
Mm.
So instead of looking at it in regards to, and this was a mindset shift, right?
Mm.
Instead of looking at it in regards to the fact that I needed to make him like me, it was more about learning from him. What could I learn from him that could make me better?
Mm.
And one thing that this is actually kind of a funny story. One thing that really made me realize this is that, like I said, we built this new house. We moved into the house before our master bathroom was done, so we were using the bathroom on the other side of the house for probably about a year and a half. And we were about 6 months in living here, where every time I got into the shower, we bought one of those shower caddies that you just hang on the side, and put all the
Yeah.
stuff on. It had two little hooks like this, and every time I showered, I would try to hang the razor. My razor had a little teeny triangle hole in it, and I would try to hang the razor on the hook, and it did not fit. I would, have
Yeah.
to like steady it on there. It would fall off. I'd pick it up, put it on again. And like I said, I'd been doing that for, I don't know, it could be 6 to 9 months. And all of a sudden, one day I get in the shower, and it must have fallen on the ground, but I get in the shower, and the razor is sitting on the hooks like this.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just looked at it, and I was like, huh, that's probably how you're supposed to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so much simpler, so much easier. But I kid you not, my brain would have kept doing it the hard way, the
Yeah.
wrong way for the rest of my life. Like I didn't even consider that there was another way to do it. And it was at that moment that I was like, what else can I learn from him because he thinks different than I do? So instead of getting defensive and irritated and upset when he would ask me questions or say
Yeah.
something different than what I thought, I started to be aware of the fact that, and ask myself, like, what is it that I can learn from him? Like, thinking about the conversations more in a curious way and thinking about, again, what can I learn from him? And that did lead to a lot of the gospel conversations that we've had.
So
We've had a
finally, now you're talking about the gospel. When you guys were not getting along, and you were judging each other, You were unable to communicate about the church
Mhm.
at all.
No.
Now you're starting to see him as a different perspective of God's basically helping you change by seeing how he can bless your life, even in the face of this undesired outcome for you.
Yes.
And now you're open and now you have this miracle of now you're talking about the church.
Yeah. We're having conversations about the church. We're having gospel conversations. We're having conversations about Jesus and God. And I'm not trying to change his. I mean, I kind of am.
You
I'm
have a
I
desire for
don't
him
know
to
why. I have
believe.
a
Yeah.
hope that well, and that's what it is. I think the hope is that we will be able to come together and find commonality, right, between
Yeah.
us, and that we'll be able to understand things in a similar way. But will we ever understand God, Jesus, and the gospel? Will we ever understand it exactly the same way? Probably not, right?
In
Like,
this life. Yeah.
and that's okay. Like, we don't have to. I don't think that's the point of this life and this process anymore. Where before, I feel like there was an expectation that all of us would understand it exactly the same.
Yeah.
And
I think that's
it still makes my brain kind of go weird because I don't
yeah, but
understand
I
how.
love that, Kristen, I love that perspective though, because for many people who are listening to this, they can relate to that confusion that occurs when we have such clarity and such beauty and hope in the gospel of Jesus Christ, and we develop a testimony and we know it's true, and then life circumstances play out in a way that doesn't feed into that belief in a way that's confusing, like losing a child or having a divorce or having someone leave the faith in a way that feels like, well, wait a minute, from what I've been taught, you should be here, right? Not you shouldn't be. So that's what I love about the eternal perspective that we learn about as we study the scriptures and we grow together, is this idea that this life is this temporary state, and in the end, Heavenly Father has infinite love and infinite time and power, and so that He is able to bring to pass the righteousness in His time, in His way. And in the meanwhile, these points of pain and resistance become some of the greatest teaching tools and moments that we have to bring us to Him. And
Yes.
this is your story of how, you start going down this road with your husband because you love him and you're connecting with him. You're going down this road, meaning you're choosing him. You're
Yes.
not judging his path as wrong in the sense that like you're personally deeply offended by it. Now it's like, well, I want to learn from him. I want to be with this individual, and now your shift is now shifting him, and now he's actually open to talking about these things. It doesn't mean in this life he might come back, but who knows?
Yeah,
Expect
I don't know.
miracles, but you're not expecting the miracle from a place of like control. I think that's the difference. It's
Right,
like
because
not the miracle you want.
the
Yeah.
miracle that I'm expecting now is for me to love him. It's not
Yeah.
for him to change, right?
Love him where he is.
Yeah, the love, that is the miracle that I'm expecting, and it is going to be a miracle. Because I mean, even now we still get into arguments sometimes, right? And I still fall back into my old pattern where I'm like, no, wait, it's me, it's about me, it's about me, right? Like, you should be like me. And then the difference is the awareness. The difference is that there is an awareness in my thoughts around, like, I still don't always do it the right way,
Yeah,
and
right.
but when I don't do it the right way, I notice. Sometimes I'm still prideful enough that I don't change it.
Yeah.
But a lot of times I am changing it, and then it's making all the difference. And back to my testimony, like, a lot of the gospel conversations that we have been able to have specifically the last 6 months have been around some of the questions that he's had in regards to things that he hears, right? Things that he hears outside the church, and, you know, letters and other things that scared me. Like, he would bring up those things 20 years ago, and we didn't really have the internet. There wasn't a way to go research it. He would bring up some things that are true about church history that I'd never heard before,
Yeah.
and and I was defensive about it. I would accuse him of, like, I'd be like, that didn't happen, and now we're finding out that some of those things really did happen. But I mean, like, I've gone in and we've learned about it together, and it's still, again, like, is a little bit scary. There was some fear there around learning about things that haven't been talked about,
Yeah.
right? We just don't talk about those things. And it's been interesting though, because for me, I feel like there were a couple experiences at the very beginning of this process for me where I knew that if I stayed close to God and the things that I did know were true, right? It doesn't really matter if anyone else knows it's true, but if I've had my own witness, and I've had my own spiritual witnesses when I've pondered the scriptures myself, when I've gone and participated in the temple, right? Like I've had lots of different times these last couple of years where I've gone to the temple by myself. I've sat in the celestial room, I've read through the scriptures, and I've had spiritual witnesses in regards to certain questions that I've had and truthfulness of things that the gospel teaches. And just because somebody else hasn't had that experience doesn't mean that it's not true for me. And that was
Right.
one of the things that I had to understand, right? That I can stand true to the truth that I have, which is constantly changing because one question answered leads to 15 more questions. And then as I wonder and ponder those things, like I would say right now that I understand the gospel so much different than I did 2 years ago, 2 weeks ago. I
Yeah.
understand the gospel now different than I did 2 weeks ago, and I probably will understand it differently 2 weeks from now, right? Because it's a continual process. But it has deepened my testimony of Jesus Christ and of the love that God has for me, and given me the confidence and the strength that I needed to again, like, just be me.
Yeah. I love it because the miracle that I see in this is that with your heart becoming more like the Savior's in terms of love and acceptance, right? You're not resisting your husband's choices, you're accepting them and choosing love, which is always choosing the Savior.
Right.
Now, not only are you guys talking about the church together, you're also being exposed to things that normally we don't have a reason to explore. You know, we were talking about that before we hit record, but whatever the reason, there really isn't a strong like reason to go through that for some people, and there's no judgment on that. But for some people, they do need to learn about what's being said about things in our church or things that have happened that for whatever reason we don't talk about internally in the church, and it creates a lot of confusion and fear. You've had to confront and face those things, and the result was a deepening of your faith, not the opposite. You're more aligned with that. And you mentioned the temple. You mentioned how you went there during this time of transition and during this time of like challenging your faith as you were opening your eyes to things that he wanted to show you to, about, you know, some doctrine that was counter to your belief. How did temple service play into that for you?
The temple has been everything for me. I mean, there was a point during this whole process where I felt very, very inadequate in my own skin. I was going to all these coaching trainings where, like I said, it was a very spiritual thing. They were teaching all these spiritual things that were amazing, and I loved learning from them, but it was like challenging my faith. And so then I'd have these questions that, but I didn't feel comfortable in that situation, like speaking the knowledge that I had, right? I
Yeah.
feel like I just went through this process where I kind of doubted whether I knew what I knew. There was doubt there, right? Because of all
Yeah.
the things that I was hearing. There was some doubt and I didn't understand. And I didn't feel comfortable in that situation when I was surrounded by all these other people that were not members of my faith, speaking out and sharing with them what I did feel like I believed. But yet I would come home and I would have my husband that was he was a different, it was different with him, right? Like he was challenging my faith all these years, but like we were getting to the point where he was like, I would come home from these things and I was able to share with him the experiences that I was going through, but yet he still doesn't believe my faith, but he doesn't really
He
know
can't fight you on these other elements either.
he doesn't know what
He's
to
starting
think
to
about
accept you
all
as
the
well.
stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then I would talk to people like family and friends, right, that are in the gospel, and they were a little bit critical of the fact that I was questioning And so there was a point where I was feeling very alone. Like
Yeah.
I felt like I couldn't, there really wasn't anywhere to go where I could actually tell people or say what I was really going through. And it was the temple at that point that was my peace, right? So, I mean, I've always gone to the temple. I've gone to the temple for 30 years pretty much by myself. But yeah, the temple these last 2 years has been the strength for me. It's where I gained my peace. And there were many times where I would just pick up and go. I would go by myself, and I feel like it was where I was getting that connection.
Isn't that amazing? And thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that, Kristen, because I think you hit a couple of really powerful points. Obviously, the temple being the strongest one is that is one of the greatest testimony builders is the connection and peace that we get after we've been going for a little bit. For a lot of people, that doesn't happen right out of the gate, but just feeling that connection there. But when it comes to like your journey, on the one end, you're you're really opening your heart to your husband, and you're trying to find a middle ground for your marriage. And so you're learning about things that are putting your faith into check. And you got to experience what a lot of people in our church might feel when people aren't as open to loving people where they are. And again, there was in your mind some judgment and some even criticism regarding any of the things you were doing, and you probably could relate to your husband at that point. You're like, wow.
Absolutely. Yeah, there were several situations where that happened, and it made me realize that that's what I had been doing to him. And not just him, right? Like I've got siblings that don't go to church anymore, and I mean, same thing. Like it's we you I don't there's probably a lot of people that can relate to this, but like I specifically remember, like my siblings that weren't going to church anymore kind of avoided some of the family functions sometimes,
Sure.
and and they were doing some of the things that were contradictory to what like drinking and smoking. And I don't know if you probably don't want to put this part in in this
I love to hear it anyway.
podcast, but like my brothers they were drinking and smoking, and I have a younger sister who was, yeah, like my mom and my other sister, we would constantly be like, well, if you just go to church again, like if you would just do the things that the church teaches, if you would just be active in the church and do the things, and they'd be like, stop judging me. You guys should stop judging us. And we'd be like, we're not judging you. Because we weren't. In my mind,
But
I
you were
wasn't.
judging them.
In my mind, I wasn't judging them, right? And
No, you thought you were trying to call them to faith. Like
right,
that's the confusion, but you're also resisting.
yeah.
Yeah, we're not,
And
yeah.
I've had conversations with my youngest sister since then, and apologized to her. Like, I am so sorry. Like, I didn't feel like I was judging you, but I was totally judging you. And interestingly enough, and I don't think it has necessarily anything to do with me and my relationship with her, but my youngest sister hadn't gone to church for 16 years, and she just went to the temple again this summer. So
Are you serious?
yes, it's been so amazing. She's so, yes, it's so great. But it's great.
Well, I love that you share that because I think there was just again in that loneliness, you turned to the Savior, and I think that's the most powerful part of this is that you found the Savior in your temple worship, and it started with you praying and believing in the words of the prophets. You were listening to President Nelson, believing his words, praying for a miracle, and through your effort, as imperfect as all of our effort is, and as hard as your effort has been, like this challenge, you started opening your heart to become a new creature as we study.
Yes.
And that creature was one who became like the Savior who loved the person who was trying his best, in your case, your husband. And as a result of that has preserved a marriage and a family that is now an example of love. And so going back to the beginning of your story, you recently celebrated 30 years and you guys were so happy in celebrating that. And what would you say is the big shift from what you felt recently versus how you had been feeling during those difficult times? What would you say the first top three things would be that were responsible for the change in that relationship?
Well, like I said, I think the thing that started for me was the physical changing, making sure that I was getting the nutrients in my body that I needed, which I did with supplements at the beginning,
Mm.
but it's gradually changed to like eating better, moving my body, exercising, doing all those things, because it's kind of amazing how much better your body feels when you're taking care of your body. And actually, just really quick, again, I don't know if this is necessarily what you're going for in the podcast, but I love the fact that you brought up meditation earlier
Yeah.
because I actually had to give a talk in sacrament meeting several months ago, and they gave me the topic of what do you do every day to um, for spiritual upliftment? What do you do daily for spiritual upliftment? And they actually, this is so funny, they gave the same topic to the three guys that spoke the week before I spoke. So they had already given me the topic, and then I'm sitting in Sunday school or sacrament meeting, and these three guys get up and talk, and they talk about the same topics. So they talk about scripture study and all the main things that we would normally talk about. So as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, what am I supposed to say now after these guys already covered all the same topics? And I really do think this was an answer from God, right? The thought came to me, you should talk about how your body is a temple,
Ah,
right? And so when I gave my talk in sacrament meeting, I talked about how, like, if you go through and read all the scriptures, like the word of wisdom and all the scriptures around temples, like, what is the aspect of all of that where God is maybe referring to this temple that he has given us to take care of, right? How much time do we actually spend in meditation where we are actually able to
be
connect with
present and
Father, right?
connect
And
with
be
our
present,
temple.
because I don't feel like I was doing that. I feel like my brain was running 500 miles an hour with all the things that I needed to do as a mom and working and, all the things that I didn't even take 5 seconds to pray, right? Again, it's, I can learn it in this other container where they talk about meditation and energy work and qigong and all these other
Yeah, Eastern philosophies.
holistic
Totally.
things, right? That we don't, it's talk about it in a different way. But if you really think about what we learn in the church, we are taught to pray and study and stillness and taking the time, and it's all the same thing. And
Well, we
so,
actually talk about prayer and meditation going together.
yeah,
David O. McKay, there's a chapter, if you look at those teachings from the prophets, there's a whole chapter, I think it's chapter 4, don't quote me on that, but it's all about prayer and meditation. And he was known, President McKay, president of the church for years and years, he was known to sit quietly and meditate after prayer. And we have talks like the most recent general conference where we talk about how to receive revelation and the importance of, after praying, sitting still and then recording the thoughts and impressions. That's all that meditation is. So it's just interesting because some of these philosophies have been inspired by God to other people as they found other pieces of truth over the years. They just have different names. But to your point, I think something you hit really hit hard is you took care of your physical temple first before you could address your marriage. And so as your I think it's a lesson for all of us on the business side of life. Richard Branson, who's a very famous CEO, executive, billionaire guy, someone asked him, like, what's the number one thing you've done for your business? Like, what's the greatest routine or thing that you do? What's the secret? And he said, exercise. He says, exercise is so important. And he was basically indicating what you're saying is that we have a physical, using the words temple, we have this physical temple that our spirit is housed in to create our soul. And so as we honor and care for that, we have greater power to there become a tool in the Lord's hands for other righteousness. So the first thing was taking care of your physical health. What were the next two?
yeah, which is exactly what the word of wisdom is, right? Like, if
Yes.
you really dig in and learn about the word of wisdom, that is what it is. It's taking care of your body, what you put in your body, what you don't put in your body, and exercising. That's what it is. And it's interesting because I think it, for me, going to the temple, the building temple, right? That is the place where I actually took the time to be still. And I didn't do that anywhere else.
So you were at the house of the Lord with your physical temple, relaxing your temple in your head so that you can
Right?
receive the information you need. I love that.
Yeah, but how many of us are like that? I mean, and I'm still working on that. Like, meditation and taking the stillness and even the scripture study and the prayer, like, that's a hard thing for me. My brain still goes pretty fast and it needs to slow down.
Yeah, I
But
love
it
that.
feels
What were the other things that you did that really were transformative in where how you used to feel in the relationship until what you recently felt?
well. The second thing I think is changing my mindset around what I was focusing on. So focusing on what I want instead of what I don't want. Right?
Uh,
There's an aspect of how important the words we use are in our thoughts and out loud, and paying attention and being aware of the fact that I wanted to focus on having a healthy, happy, connected relationship, not on a relationship where I didn't want to fight anymore, right? And
uh,
there's a whole scientific aspect of the fact of the way that our conscious and our subconscious brain works together, right? But our brain doesn't really know the difference. If I'm constantly thinking about not wanting to fight, not wanting to fight, not wanting to fight, it's still focused on fighting, right?
yeah,
And
and
focusing,
like the miracle you wanted was for him to, and I think the parallel in your spiritual desires were that not wanting to fight was him to change
yes, yes. And as soon as
versus wanting to have a healthy relationship was you changing.
Absolutely. So as soon as I was able to like figure that out in my own mind and realize that it was me that needed to change and stopped focusing on make trying to get him to change and trying to fix him, then the whole dynamic in our relationship shifted.
Amazing.
And the
And
interesting thing about that, Will, is that he is changing.
yeah,
Right?
ironically, with you trusting the Lord and following His
Yeah.
direction, and you changing now there is the change in him
Yeah. Yeah.
and your sister. Like there's these changes that are occurring in your world because I just don't think we're present as individuals. How often we judge and criticize. Like I think like we can justify these things thinking, well, they're doing things going against the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's okay for me, but what does the Savior teach us? You know what I mean? Like it's so I love that. What's the third thing? If you had to pick a third thing.
The third thing was the emotions, I think. Learning all these tools in my coaching program to actually release the emotions and stop holding on to things. And
Mhm.
I mean, it actually, again, connected back to my physical body because I didn't realize like some of the pains that I'd had back pain for years and just things that were happening in my body where you've maybe heard of like the body keeps the score book.
For people who are listening, a lot of times people will confuse mental health when it comes to spiritual. And we have to recognize back in the day, like 50 years ago, no one used to run for their physical health. Now we're understanding the link in how we can treat our minds, mental health. And now, like, thanks to President Holland, who just recently passed away, he was a brilliant lead generator of us understanding the importance of using things like consultants or not consultants, sorry, counselors, getting therapy. Those he opened the door for us
Coaching.
because in coaching, those types of elements are for mental awareness and for mental health. And then now we're drawing the distinction. That book, Your Body Keeps the Body Keeps the Score, is one of the most foundational elements of connecting how our minds and our bodies are related to experiencing our existence.
Yeah.
Spiritual is a third component that all overlap. So you're saying that that third piece was understanding how your mind was playing into this and how actual technical training in that space mentally served you. So
Absolutely.
it's amazing how the temple was this spiritual grounding force for you physically as you were healing physically and mentally, which
Hmm.
is where the coaching came in for you.
Yeah.
But it all came back to the Savior, and as a result, now you're seeing these miracles in your world. Kristen, that's amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's been an amazing journey for me for sure.
Well, I am so grateful that I've had you on the show, and thank you for sharing this journey. So many people are going to get so much out of this because they relate to you on many levels. As you know, part of the show is all about family history as well. So, what would you want your kids and grandkids to know about the temple as it pertains to your journey?
Um, Actually, I do have a family history story. Do you want me to tell it?
Let's do it.
I didn't even think about it until you just said that, but this is actually really, it kind of ties back into the relationship too, because I had, during all those years when Clay and I were having a hard time, there were a lot of promptings for me to go and do my family history.
Uh,
And again, I was busy, had a million things going on, so I didn't make a huge effort out of it, right? But I was sitting in a Sunday school and Sunday school one day, and the Sunday school teacher was telling a story about how I felt like he was telling my life, right? He was saying how It was a husband whose wife quit going to church, and she was praying and praying and praying that he would change. And one night, the wife, did I just say it backwards? Yeah, because this was a husband and the wife had quit going to church. So the wife had a dream one night where her grandpa came to her in the dream and told her that she needed to go back to church. But he was basically, there was more details to it than that, but I really related to what he was saying, and it just kept bringing back the fact that I kept having that prompting to work on family history. But I was like, how does family history have anything to do with that? And this particular, like in this particular story, the grandpa, she was really close to the grandpa, and he had meant a ton to her, and he told her she knew exactly what she was supposed to be doing, and so then she realized that she needed to go back to church, right? So in my mind, I was like, well, that's great, and I have been having this prompting that I should do family history, but I'm like, I still don't know how it has anything to do with me, because I don't feel like my husband, like his dad wasn't even a member of the church, and his mom wasn't going to church anymore, and I don't feel like there was anybody in his church, in his ancestry, that was really going to like come back to him in a dream, and anything like that.
Yeah.
Right? I was just like, how does this have to do with anything? And then a couple years ago, then his dad passed away. Okay. And he was very close to his dad. And there were several conversations that I had with his dad before he passed away, not being a member of the church, where he actually had a cousin who was a member and did family history all the time. So we had a lot of conversations about family history. He'd be like, you should get a hold of my cousin Kathy, and you should give the information to, like, you guys should work together, because I know she does all that stuff. And so there were several times that I talked to his cousin Kathy. Well, then he passes away. And then a year later, we had a really good friend who passed away in an airplane accident. And I was at the temple a couple days after he passed away. And I was standing in, you know how when you do initiatories, you go from room to room?
Yeah.
And there's the one where you finished and you're just kind of waiting to go into the next one to start. I was standing there in that room waiting to go into the next start of the next initiatory name, and I just had this overwhelming feeling that our friend who had just passed away was there. And he said to me, I'm here now and I'm helping.
Wow.
And I was in tears. Like, I was literally in tears. And then there was another experience where we actually went and did the temple work for my father-in-law. And when we were doing the father-in-law, it was the same type of thing. Like, I had the same experience where it was like,
wow,
no, I am here helping. And it was just like a full circle connection of, you should be working on your family history. And even though I didn't understand why at the time, like, it came around full circle. And then it was really me. Like, I'm actually having this connection as I'm talking to you, that when I had both of those promptings, it was probably really around changing my heart. Right? Didn't have anything to do with him.
Right. I love it. Well, Kristen, thanks for sharing that. You've been a joy to work with. I know you are as well, a coach now in this domain. Could you share with everyone, if they wanted to get a hold with you, how they can do that?
Yes, I have an Instagram account. It's called Body and Spirit, body period and period spirit. So you can follow me on there. And then Facebook. I'm available on Facebook. How much information do you want?
That's good. That's actually perfect, Kristen. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's been such a joy to have you.
Thank you so much. It's been so fun to talk to you and share my story. And I love all your insights and everything that you've had to share too. It was great to get to know you.
All right, guys. Well, thank you again for listening. Until next time. Thank you for listening to today's episode. We want to hear from you. What additional show ideas would you like to hear about? What questions do you have in your heart that we can help answer? Please leave those in the show notes of today's episode or over on Instagram. Thank you for your cooperation in helping make this show the best it can be. Until next time.